The room was carved from living crystal, glowing softly with the bioluminescent pulse of the alien ship. Captain Arian Vel sat cross-legged on the smooth floor, her silver skin glinting under the light. She'd dismissed her attendance hours ago, yet her heart refused to calm. The human was coming. Across the galaxy, humans had earned reputations both feared and revered. They were fragile-looking creatures, flesh, bone, and nerve, but they'd stood against empires that had existed for millennia. Their willpower and defiance were legend, and even the Zathri Council had voted to invite one aboard the flagship Serenial Dawn. Arian, daughter of the Vel matriarch, volunteered to host him. Or maybe, if she was being honest, she wanted to understand him. When the door opened with a hiss, the human stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark uniform of simple lines. No shimmering robes, no jeweled crests like Zathri warriors wore. His eyes, impossibly dark and bright at once, scanned the room, assessing everything in seconds. "Captain Arian Vel?" he asked, voice calm. "Yes," she replied, standing with a poise that masked her unease. "You may call me Arian, human. And you may call me Daniel." He didn't bow, didn't avert his eyes. He simply stood there, every movement precise but unhurried, as if he wasn't surrounded by technology centuries beyond his own species. The Zathri found him unnerving for that reason alone. No fear, no awe, just presence. "Your quarters are prepared," she said, motioning toward a curved door. "You'll find the atmosphere and gravity adjusted to your needs." "Appreciated," he said, and gave a small nod before glancing out the crystalline window that looked into the nebula beyond. "You have a beautiful ship." She hesitated. Few outsiders ever called their ships beautiful. Most called them strange, cold, or alive. "You see beauty where others see danger," she said. He turned to her, that faint human half-smile flickering. Maybe that's what humans do best. That night, Arian couldn't sleep. The human's presence lingered in her mind. His calm voice, his steady gaze, his refusal to act impressed or intimidated. She'd hosted dozens of alien diplomats before, but none of them made her pulse quicken with curiosity and unease like Daniel did. When morning light bled through the transparent hull, she found him already awake, sitting cross-legged on the viewing platform, staring into the starfield. "You meditate?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "Not exactly. I just think. Sometimes that's more dangerous." She tilted her head. "Dangerous? To think. To remember," he said simply. "My species learns from pain. We hold it close so we don't repeat it." The Zathri didn't understand that. They had evolved in a society where pain was something filtered out, forgotten. But humans, they carried it, lived with it, used it. She watched the quiet strength in his stillness. His uniform was simple, yet there was something noble about the way he wore it. The Zathri warriors were taller, faster, stronger, but none of them had that strange, unshakable composure. Later that day, as she escorted him through the ship's observation decks, curious eyes followed them. Whispers spread in telepathic ripples. The human, the Terran. Some were curious, some disgusted, others fascinated. The Zathri were a proud, cold-blooded species, disciplined to the point of emotional sterility. They didn't understand why this soft, warm creature made their captain pause mid-sentence or glance twice. When they reached the Hall of Echoes, a vast chamber filled with pulsating crystal walls that responded to emotion, Arian stopped. "This place reacts to neural energy," she explained. "The crystals reflect emotion. They glow brighter when we're open, dimmer when we're afraid." Daniel nodded, watching the walls shimmer faintly. What color does curiosity make? She smiled faintly. Blue. The walls blazed bright blue. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected that. It wasn't just her curiosity the crystals were reading. It was his. The human was projecting emotions strong enough to blend with hers. You feel deeply, she said quietly. He shrugged. Humans usually do. We're built that way. It's a weakness and a weapon. Arian stepped closer, drawn without understanding why. Our kind hides feeling. It's unbecoming of command. Maybe that's why you command ships, he said softly, eyes locking onto hers. Not hearts. The words struck her like a pulse through her chest. The crystals shifted again. Red now, the color of tension. Daniel, she warned, but her voice trembled. He didn't move closer. Didn't touch her. Just stood there steady and honest. I didn't mean to offend. You didn't, she whispered. You just saw too much. That evening, she dismissed the guards outside her quarters. A reckless decision, but she couldn't bear their eyes or their questions. She found Daniel in the training chamber, sweat beading on his brow as he moved through a slow, deliberate combat sequence, human martial arts, fluid and precise. Every motion told a story, a soldier's life built on discipline and scars. She watched him in silence until he stopped, wiping his face with a towel. Didn't think aliens were allowed to stare, he said without turning. Her cheeks flushed, faint silver against silver. I was observing. For research. Of course, he said, smiling faintly. She stepped into the room. You fight without weapons. Sometimes the weapon is just an extension of the will. He looked at her now. Would you like to learn? Her instinct screamed no. She was a captain, not a warrior. But something in his tone disarmed her. Yes. He nodded, moving closer. Then start here. He took her hands gently, placing one on his chest, the other on his forearm. Feel the movement. It's not about power. It's about intent. Her pulse quickened. His skin was warm, shockingly warm against hers. The Zathari were cold-blooded. Warmth like his felt alive, almost intoxicating. You're trembling, he said quietly. I'm unused to physical contact. He nodded. Then we stop here. He released her hands and stepped back. For reasons she couldn't name, she wished he hadn't. That night, she stood before the mirror in her private chamber. Zathari beauty standards prized perfection. Flawless symmetry, shimmering garments woven with light. But for the first time, she wondered what the human saw when he looked at her. Did he see the commander or the woman beneath the armor? When she heard the soft chime at her door, she froze. Come in, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Daniel stepped in carrying a datapad. You asked for reports on the Terran front. I thought I'd deliver them personally. He placed the pad on her desk, but his eyes lingered on her. Unguarded, curious, not lustful. It was the gaze of someone who saw. She turned to face him fully. The room was silent, the hum of the ship pulsing like a heartbeat around them. Daniel, she began softly. If I were to ask you something personal. He smiled slightly. You can ask. Her throat tightened. If I removed the symbols of command, the garments, the markings, would you still see me as captain? Or would you see me as something else? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then quietly. Depends on who you want to be seen as. Her hands trembled. The Zathari didn't blush, but her bioluminescent markings flared. Bright, vulnerable, betraying emotion she didn't want him to see. Will you stay, she whispered. If I undress, human? The question hung between them like a spark in a void. His expression didn't change. No lust, no mockery. Just understanding. "Arian," he said, voice low. "If what you want is to be seen, not taken, then yes. I'll stay." And in that moment, under the alien light of her chamber, the captain of the Serennial Dawn realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one in command anymore. The silence that followed was unlike any Arian had ever known. The air hummed faintly with the pulse of the ship's living core. Yet within her chamber, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Daniel stood still, not moving toward her, not retreating, waiting as if every second belonged entirely to her choice. Arian's fingers hesitated on the clasp of her mantle. The heavy garment symbolized command, discipline, control, everything she had ever been. To remove it was more than disrobing. It was rebellion against the foundation of her species' order. And yet she did. The mantle slid from her shoulders with a whisper, revealing the delicate tracing of luminescent lines that mapped her veins, glowing softly beneath translucent skin. To the Zathari, this was vulnerability. To a human, it might have been beauty. Daniel didn't move. His gaze didn't wander. He looked at her as if the act itself wasn't physical, but sacred. "You're trembling," he said again, voice low. "I fear this," she admitted. "Not because of you, but because of what it means." "And what does it mean?" "That I am no longer certain who I am when I'm near you." He exhaled slowly, stepping closer, still keeping a respectful distance. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Sometimes to understand ourselves, we have to be seen through someone else's eyes. She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the nebula's violet glow. "And what do your eyes see now?" "A leader," he said softly. "And a soul brave enough to be human without being one." Her breath caught. The words felt heavier than any title, any oath. For a while neither spoke. Arian moved to the window, watching the endless drift of stars. Daniel joined her, his reflection merging with hers in the crystalline surface. "You've seen war," she said finally. "You carry it with you." He nodded. "Too much of it. Humans fight because we have to, not because we love it. But sometimes I think we're afraid to stop. Afraid of what peace would make us face. What would that be? Everything we've done to survive." She turned, studying him. "And yet you still hope. I see it in you." "Hope's our curse," he said with a faint smile. "And our salvation." Her markings pulsed brighter. The Zathari call hope an instability, a flaw in emotional control. "Then maybe flaws are what make us whole," he said simply. Later that night they shared no touch. Only conversation. They spoke of the stars, of the ancient wars that carved empires, of what it meant to be alive in a universe vast enough to forget you. For the first time in years, Arian laughed. A small, startled sound, strange and musical. Daniel grinned. "That's a good sound." She tilted her head. "It feels uncontrollable. That's how you know it's real." And she realized, to her shock, that she didn't want the night to end. The following day, the Serennial Dawn received a distress beacon from a Zathari outpost, under siege by raiders near the dark edge of the Tyrian rift. The captain in her took command instantly, her voice regaining its authority, orders cutting through the air like blades. Daniel followed silently, observing from the tactical platform. When the ship dropped out of warp, the scene was chaos. The outpost was burning, debris fields scattering like dying stars. Arian's crew hesitated. The enemy ships were using energy weapons designed to scramble Zathari shielding. "Open forward batteries," Arian ordered. "Angle shields for pulse rebound." "They'll collapse," Daniel interrupted. She turned sharply. You would contradict a Zathari captain on her own bridge. He met her gaze calmly. If it saves your ship, yes. Your shields are calibrated for reflection. Their weapons feed on reflection. You need absorption. Bleed the energy off instead. Her officers stared, scandalized. A human giving orders. But she didn't hesitate. Do it, she commanded. The moment the recalibration was complete, the enemy's barrage struck, and the shields held. Energy dispersed like harmless rain against glass. Fire all batteries! Arian roared. The serennial dawn blazed. Pulse beams lanced through the void, tearing through the raiders. Within minutes, the battlefield was silent. Her crew erupted in telepathic song, the Zathari equivalent of cheers. But Arian turned to Daniel. You were right, she said softly. Again. A shrug. It's what humans do. Adapt when everything else fails. She smiled faintly. Perhaps that is why your kind endures. Hours later, as the ship limped away from the battle, Daniel found her alone in the observation deck once more. You saved a lot of lives, he said quietly. So did you. I only offered advice. She shook her head. You offered perspective. He leaned against the crystalline railing, watching her. You're different from the others. The way you lead, the way you listen. She met his eyes. You make it sound as if that's unusual. For your people, maybe it is. For mine, it's everything. The moment hung between them again, that same fragile, electric pause. Arian stepped closer, the glow of her markings dimming to a soft silver. When you first came aboard, she whispered, I wanted to understand humanity. I wanted to dissect what made you so resilient, so maddeningly alive. And now I understand. It's not resilience. It's heart. You keep standing because you feel, even when it hurts. He smiled faintly. We don't really know any other way. She hesitated, then reached out. Not a command, not a gesture of ownership, but of connection. Her fingers brushed his hand, cold against warm. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For staying. Daniel turned his hand, lacing his fingers gently with hers. You asked if I'd stay if you undressed, he murmured. The truth is, I stayed because you unmasked. Her breath caught. I undressed a human expectation, she whispered, eyes glistening. And you undressed fear. Days passed. Rumors spread among the crew. Of the captain who defied protocol, who spoke with the human as an equal. Some whispered she was compromised. Others said she was evolving. When the serennial dawn reached Zathari command, the council summoned her immediately. You allowed a human to influence military action, the elder accused. You risked contamination of our command structure. Arian stood tall. I risked nothing that wasn't worth saving. The humans saved hundreds of lives. By undermining protocol. By showing us why protocol alone cannot save us, she retorted. Our perfection blinds us. Humanity's imperfection opens them to growth. We forget that strength without heart is just cold metal in the dark. The chamber fell silent. Even the elders hesitated before replying. You've changed, Captain Vel. She met their gaze evenly. Yes. And so must we. Later, as she walked the quiet corridors toward the docking bay, Daniel waited by the shuttle ramp. So, he said, do I take that as an invitation to stay or an order to leave? Arian smiled, the first true smile of her life. Neither. Stay if you wish. Leave if you must. But know this. You've already changed something no one else could. What's that? Me. He stepped closer. Then maybe I'll stay a little longer. She nodded, her markings glowing faintly blue, the color of curiosity, of connection. Then perhaps I'll finally learn what it means to be human. That night, as the stars drifted past the great hull of the Serenial Dawn, two figures stood side by side, one born of cold light, one of fragile fire. Neither sought conquest nor surrender, only understanding. And somewhere in the endless dark, the universe seemed to pause, to witness the quiet miracle of what happens when a human heart meets an alien soul, and both decide to stay.